What's happening, guys, and welcome back to Sliced. I have to apologize, I feel like I've ghosted from YouTube for like, what has it been, 2 weeks now, something like that. I haven't been inactive. I've actually been posting pretty much every day on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, Facebook as well. So if you only follow me on YouTube and you want to see more of me, go ahead and check me out on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook as well. I'll post a lot more on there than I post on YouTube. But having said that, we are back today with a classic. We're making beef Wellington. Yes, you heard me right. I'm talking about the same beef Wellington that you've seen all the time in Hell's Kitchen, Gordon Ramsay's signature dish, an absolute classic. But what is a beef Wellington? Well, quite simply, it's the best part of the fillet of beef, the Chateaubriand, and it's seared off, brushed in mustard, and then it's wrapped traditionally in a duxelle of mushroom, some crepes, and puff pastry before it is baked in the oven, creating layers of perfect goodness. Now in the Gordon Ramsay version, he actually wraps it with Parma Ham instead of crepes. And so today we're going to be doing a sort of take on that. Obviously I can't really eat Parma Ham or mustard for that case, as Dijon mustard contains white wine. But I'm going to sort of play around with it and see how we do. Before we start this though, you might be wondering, where can I find a good piece of fillet, the perfect fillet? And so this is where today's sponsors come in. I could not have done this without the help from Saffron. You've seen them before. They supplied the steaks for my steak trilogy videos, which were absolutely delicious. And they're back again with a really nice, perfect cut of fillet. You can tell that this beef has been looked after. It's just so good. The quality is amazing. The price is very fair considering what they're offering you, so I'd recommend you go ahead and check them out. I'll leave their website in the description below. Also, before I get into this video, because I don't really want to distract from the beef Wellington itself, I'm not going to be providing the recipes for the mashed potato or the cream sauce that I'm putting over the top. However, I've made this perfectly silky mash on my Instagram, so I'll leave a link to that in the description. And the cream sauce has been made previously, so I'll leave a link to that video as well. With that being said, we're just gonna get straight into the Wellington itself. Okay, so let's take a look at our fillet of beef first. You wanna make sure this is primed, ready, and perfect for your Wellington. By that, what I mean is I've blended up 200 grams of salt. It can be any kind of salt, table salt is absolutely fine. Half a bunch of thyme and about 2 tablespoons of sugar. This is going to create a dry brine. I'll explain why this is necessary. What I did was sprinkle it over the top of my fillet before leaving it overnight in the fridge and then brushing the salt immediately off. You don't want to leave it for too long, but just overnight is perfect. What this does, it draws out the excess moisture from the meat, intensifying that flavor and giving you a really rich sort of flavor. If you're spending money on the most expensive part of the fillet, and bear in mind this piece of meat lies underneath the back muscles of the cow, so it does little to no work. There's no fat, no muscle, it's just very, very tender. And that's why it's so expensive, and that's why it needs to be treated really well. So after doing this really simple dry brine, it's going to extract the moisture, intensify that flavor. I'm brushing it off once it's rested overnight because I don't want it to be too salty, and that salt's going to continue to penetrate the meat the longer you leave it, so we're going to brush it off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it in cling film and just tighten it really, really well. This is going to create that circular shape. One of the really big aspects of making a good Wellington is keeping that perfect circular shape. So I'm going to wrap it in cling film, and I've left it overnight as well. So basically the prep for this was done 2 days in advance. Of course, you can just take your fillet and cook it straight away if you have no time. But I really feel like the Wellington is something that you shouldn't rush. You should take your time with it so that it's really simple from the beginning to the end. It's very simple. Wellingtons aren't hard, they just take a lot of time. Okay, so while our beef is out of the way, let's take a look at our duxelle. What is a duxelle? A duxelle is basically minced up mushrooms that have been cooked off into a sort of really fine paste. What I've got here is I've got 2 punnets of chestnut mushrooms and 1 punnet of sort of an assortment of mushrooms that I found. These are mainly oyster mushrooms. And all I'm going to do is run my knife through it, chopping it as fine as possible. Not gonna lie, this was very, very long. If you have a food processor, absolutely use it. It's so much easier. Just blend it up until it's in nice fine pieces. Now mushrooms have a lot of water inside it, so what we need to do is cook this water off. Move my mushrooms to one side. I've also chopped up some shallot and some thyme and some garlic as well, and I'm just going to chuck the lot of it in a pan with some oil and butter, and I'm going to cook this off on a medium heat. You're going to immediately start to see that moisture kind of come out of it. You can give it a little season at this point as well. Once that moisture is fully cooked off, you'll start to see this massive mushrooms and shallot and garlic and thyme just reduce into this really concentrated paste. Now I remember at my 3rd year of university, I had to develop a duxelle recipe for this vegetarian dish I was making. Now I was trying out different duxelle recipes, and I feel like this next step was really key for me in making the perfect duxelle. What I did, once the mushrooms had fully cooked off, I deglazed the pan with about a tablespoon or 2 of any dark vinegar. You can use sherry vinegar, you can use balsamic. I actually used some date vinegar, which was really, really good. And once that's cooked off, I put in a tablespoon of brown sugar. This might seem random, having that sour and that sweet kind of blend, but I really feel like it brings out so much flavor in the mushrooms. Once that's fully cooked off, you're gonna spread that out nice and thin onto a tray and let that cool off completely to one side. Okay, while that's cooling off, we can take a look at our fillet. What I did was was I trimmed off the ends of the fillet just so that I can have that nice perfect cylinder. And of course the scraps were really delicious, so I kind of had to sneak a bit to the side, if you know what I'm saying. What I did was I heated up my frying pan to a smoking hot temperature, a bit of oil in the pan, and I seared off my fillet really well. On all sides, as Gordon Ramsay would say, using the back of the pan to kind of cook one side of it as well. And I seared the top and bottom and left it to one side. You want to leave it to rest. Now some people might be asking, should I cook my fillet straight out the fridge or should I let it rest first? And I personally would say let it rest first. Why? Because when it goes into the oven, you need to make sure that that core temperature is cooking. There's so many layers around it, so even though it seems like it's going in the oven for a long time, it does need to come out of the fridge. Taking your steak out of the fridge about half an hour in advance is always better. With that being said, you can get away with leaving it out for this recipe because it's going to be baked anyway, but I personally like to let it out the fridge for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. While this is resting on one side, we're going to brush it over. Traditionally this is with mustard. Unfortunately, Dijon mustard is made with white wine, which I don't drink. Now a replacement in this case could be horseradish cream, but personally I don't really like that kind of peppery strong flavour that comes with mustard and horseradish. So I'm going to scrap it all together. Yeah, you heard me right. I'm going to go for something completely different. What I've done is I've mixed in some honey, melted butter, and some cracked black pepper to form a sort of honey, buttery pepper sort of mix to glaze the top. I want to go for that kind of sweet flavor. That's just my kind of taste. But you can absolutely go ahead and use horseradish cream if you would like. That's very simple to make and to buy in pre-made jars. And it will give that steak a really sort of peppery, strong taste. But anyway, I glazed mine over with the honey butter and I let it rest so that it becomes completely cold. So now it comes to assembling. Now, obviously I'm not using Parma ham, and so I was trying to look for the next best replacement. I actually got this off Saffron Alley as well. It really tasted amazing. We had some beef pastrami. In hindsight, I would have just gone traditional and gone with the crepe. So I would recommend, if you obviously can't find a good Parma ham replacement, then just go for the crepe. It's not because the pastrami was bad, I just think it was a bit too thick for this, and I think it would have benefited using something a bit thinner and more delicate instead, like how Gordon Ramsay used Parma ham. With that being said, it still worked really well. I'm going to layer off some cling film over onto my table before layering my beef pastrami in a way that sort of fits the beef to make one roll. That doesn't make any sense. In order to roll the beef once over, that's how much sort of I've used. It's not really a measurement I can give you, it depends entirely on the size of your fillet. What I would recommend is actually allowing yourself some extra space so that you can trim off anything if you need to. But what we want is that everything covers our beef once. We don't want it to wrap over more than one time, it will just look too messy. So I have my cling film on the table, I've layered my beef pastrami out so they're overlapping, and I've spread out my duxelle in the way that I think, again, that it will cover the beef once. I rested my fillet on the bottom and then carefully and gently tucked over the cling film just so that it wrapped over. Once you've done that, again, you're going to tighten this into a nice cylinder and let it sit in the fridge for about 10 minutes. This is so that it holds its shape really well. While that's in the fridge, I'm going to take my puff pastry out and roll it out onto a lightly floured surface so that it forms a nice large piece. It's absolutely fine if it's way bigger than the beef. That's all good, just so long as you have enough to work with. I'm going to take it out of the cling film, placing it onto my pastry, which I've trimmed off the edges. And I'm going to roll it very carefully and tightly. You don't want to have a huge gap in your beef Wellington, you want it to be nice and tight. Once it's reached the point where the pastry is sort of tucked under the beef once, you're going to make a trim and just press it down to seal it. The important thing here is that you want that crease to be underneath the pastry. We used to make loads of vegetarian Wellingtons actually at the hotel I used to work at. We used to make them sort of quite small, but it was the same principle, and one of the key things here was having that seam underneath the pastry. Why is that? Because when it rises, that seam is really crucial in giving it lift. So if that seam, if you over-rolled it and that seam was on the side, you can imagine what's going to happen, right? All the air is going to push out and it's just going to lean to one side. So you need to make sure that seam is right at the bottom. You don't want to do all that hard work and then throw it away over the rolling technique. Anyway, once that seam is at the bottom and it's been trimmed, I'm going to take the sides, twist it and tuck it in as much as possible to create an airtight sort of pocket. This is going to allow the steam to build up inside the pastry to cook the actual beef. Once that's done, you're pretty much good. All we're going to do now is work fairly quickly while the pastry is still cold, and I'm going to egg wash it really nicely, just using one beaten egg. You can use just the egg yolks if you want it to be extra yellow. I'm just going to glaze it over really nicely before scoring it with the back of my knife. You can absolutely use a lattice or something like that and just sort of cover the top, make it really nice and fancy like Ramsay does. But I'm just going to keep it nice and simple for today and just give it a nice sort of cross score. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, I'm gonna give it a nice cross mark all the way over. I'm gonna bake this in the oven, 190 degrees. I'm gonna bake it for about 40 minutes. I wanna go for that nice medium rare kind of look. Play around with this. If you want it to be super pink, go for around the 30-minute mark. If you want it to be more on the medium well side, go for about 45 minutes. If you want to ruin this steak, go ahead and make it well done, cook it for an hour, but I really wouldn't recommend doing that. If you've got such a good piece, like a beef fillet, you really want to treat it well. Here's the thing as well, because beef fillet is so tender, this is actually a cut of meat that you can get away with eating medium rare. So if you're someone that really likes your steak well done because you don't like chewy meat, then beef fillet is the one for you, because however you eat this piece of meat, it's so soft. It's like you're eating lamb, for example, like a really nice tender piece of lamb. It will just cut away like butter. It's so simple. And I know that steaks like sirloin, rump and ribeye can be a bit tougher when you eat it rare, but I really would recommend trying this out at a more pinker kind of color. Trust me, you won't regret it. It's gonna be super soft, especially this quality from Saffron. I'm not just saying it because they sent me the steak, I'm genuinely saying it. My whole family thought it was absolutely delicious and tender. And they don't normally like pink steak, so that's gotta say something, right? Anyway, so I let it rest for about 10-15 minutes. Just like a normal steak, it needs to allow that juice to sort of come out. You'll start to see it seep out the pastry a bit. I'm gonna trim off the edges and wait, actually, you know what? I'm not even gonna talk through this bit. You just need to listen. Oh, beautiful. Oof, Lord have mercy, that sound is absolutely beautiful. It's music to my ears. What I'm going to do is serve this up just on some wilted kale, and I put my really silky dairy-free mash on the side. You can find the recipe for that on Instagram. And I've topped it off with my cream sauce. Again, the recipe for that will be on another YouTube video. Oof, well, that was a lot. I'm just checking the time on the camera. I've been filming for 18 minutes, so I reckon this video will be around the 12-minute mark. So if you saw it through all the way to the end, good on you, and I hope you do try it out. If not, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Please like, subscribe, click on the notifications, follow me on my social at slice_YT on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, everything. I post loads more there, so if you think that I'm ghosting from YouTube, it's just because I spend more of my time on the other platforms. They're just much easier. You want to see quick videos, you want to see a different side to me, go ahead and check it out. I'm almost at 5,000 on Instagram. I'm gonna do a massive giveaway on my Instagram once we hit 2 years on Sliced, which is only about a week or so from now actually. So we're almost there. We're almost there. So follow me now. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.